Please take your seat, please, so that we could start the session. I will be requesting Abu Balasab, please join as a panelist. Panelists waiting. My apology from Jasmine and Dr. Bernhard that it took a bit longer. So we'll be starting in a few minutes' time. Please accept my apology for this delay.
Mohsin, can I start the presentation from my laptop?
Bernhard, please wait. We are waiting for the panelists. So the session will be, first I will be talking, I will be giving a 2-minute overview of the session, and then I will be introducing that you and then the other panelists. And then after that one, we will request you to give a presentation.
Yeah, you will allow me to start the presentation from here because I need the cursor to guide the audience.
Okay, so we'll be giving a permission to you so that you could be able to share that the screen. So maybe to see, just give the access.
Yeah.
So that we could test.
Let's do a test.
Bernhard,
yeah.
Dr. Bernhard, please share the screen using the share screen so that we will see that if it's working, everything is fine. Dr. Abu Balasab, I will request you, sir, please come to the stage.
Okay, can you see the slide?
Yes, we are able to see that the window explorer, but we need to, if you could please open that the PowerPoint presentation. So that will make sure that the presentation is working.
Stop sharing.
No, Dr. Bernhard, we can't see. Please again try to share the screen.
Can see?
Dr. Bernhard, I will request you to please share the screen. Okay, yes, now we are able to see it. Please try one more time just to go further.
Is it moving?
No, it's not yet. We see that your screen is moving, but then you need to click on that one. Yes, now it's working. Thank you.
Can you see the cursor?
Okay. Yes, Doctor.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
So we'll start, if you could go back to your first slide, and then we'll start the presentation later on. Yeah. Once in a few minutes time.
Should I stop share?
Good afternoon, everyone. Distinguished Minister Sahab, Mohsin Ghari Sahab, Secretary Saif Anjam Saab and Dr. Abu Balasab, who are the panel member. And then we have the two other panel members, Mrs. Yasmin Sadeki, who is the Director of the Asian Development Bank for operational issues for the Central and West Asia, and Dr. Bernhard Tischbein, who is a senior researcher at University of Bonn, from University of Bonn, Germany, and he will be giving a keynote speak. And then, ladies and gentlemen, before we'll be asking the Bernhard to give a presentation, I would like to give you some of the key point. Let me first introduce myself. My name is Mohsen Hafiz. I am the EMI country representative and principal researcher in water sources management, and I will be moderating the session for this afternoon. When we talk about the water in Pakistan, Pakistan has a unique challenge, and as well as that some of the issues which is leading toward the mismanagement. If you're looking around the climate, Pakistan is the country which is on, in terms of climate variability, 5th climate vulnerable country around the globe. And then when we are looking around in the morning, Secretary Saab, Minister Saab already talked about the water sources issue there. We have a limited water storage of 30 days. And then as we are moving for the future, we need to have more water for the domestic water, for the livestock, for industry and environment, which has been described in the National Water Policy, which has been also translated into the Punjab Water Act, the KP Water Act. So all that there is a right need to get. But looking around that, the agriculture sector, which is taking around 90% of the water is in the country, is used for agriculture sector. And then out of the 90%, if you took a look around the 4 major crops, as Mohsen Laghari Saab mentioned, 80% of the water is used for the 4 major crops: maize, sugarcane, wheat, and cotton. And that has a contribution of only 5% in the GDP. So typically, we always think about that one, the hardware infrastructure and everything, but we need to think about the other alternatives. What are the other alternatives? What are the non-conventional ways how we could conserve more water? There are the nature-based solutions, which we could promote artificial recharging, whether during the monsoon season, as well as rainfall runoff harvesting during the monsoon season, and all those options are there. Small check dam, many of those things where we don't need to look around the bigger infrastructure, but looking around this, some of the innovative. So we're talking about the resilience of the water infrastructure. If we are comparing the last is about the water productivity, as here this is in the context of Pakistan, 90% water used for agriculture, but now we need to move forward. For the future, we are talking about how we could implement the national water policy, how we could go for the agriculture sector, and then have it available for that the other sector, multi-sector, that's the demand is there. And one of the ways that one, if we improve value of water, because we are using even at the household purposes, we are not save water saving, so we don't have a value. We think water is a free commodity. How we could improve that the water, and then that needed raising awareness, also looking around the technical solution. And today in the session, we'll be looking around that one, water, how we could utilize the precious. I would like to introduce my panelists members. So first I will give that they introduce Dr. Bernhard Tischbein. So all the panelists, especially Yasmin and Bernhard, when I will be complete your introduction, please just say yes. If you are able to share that the video, that will be really good, so that is will know. So Bernhard Tischbein is working as a senior researcher at the Center for Development Research, University of Bonn, and he is the person whom I know more than 22 years, and he's really passionate about that one, how to improve the water use efficiency at the farm scale level, how to do at the system level, and how we could develop different innovative solutions. And he has done a lot of work in the integrated water sources management, and also working in 14 or 15 other countries. Typical example is in Central Asia, where he led the project over the 8 or 9 years. I had the opportunity to work with them. How exactly, what are the pinpoint where we could make the intervention and how we could improve the productivity. Another classical example is he also led on the in the West Africa and the Volta Basin in Ghana, where the similar issue, how we could develop the sustainable solutions which are adopted by the farmers within the changing climate. The third is, he is not unknown into the Pakistan. He has been working in Pakistan over more than 8 or 9 years. Recently, he led one project on reducing the water footprints of cotton irrigation by improved irrigation scheduling, advanced handling of techniques, and enhanced integration of the irrigation into the agriculture system. That's called Cotton Grove project in Pakistan. So with that one, thank you, Bernhard. I welcome you.
Yeah, thank you for
Bernhard
nice.
is online. He's sharing. Thank you.
Thank you for nice introduction.
Now I will move to the next. Thank you, Bernhard. I will introduce my next panelist, who's also on a virtual world, Mrs. Yasmin Sadeki. Yasmin Sadeki is a UK chartered civil engineer and has a postgraduate degree in irrigation engineering. And she has more than 20 years of experience in water sources management, irrigation, knowledge management, and leading the teams. She is currently the operational director for the agriculture and natural sources sector for the Asian Development Bank, Central and West Asia department. So she donor side of thing, and as well as she worked in the water sector in various organizations. So she has a good understanding what are the issues, how they could be helped, and when they are getting a request about for any new loans or new projects there. So she has a good understanding about the complex issues, loan issues and everything. And then she's working as well as on a ADB strategic water group, water sector group, and so that's it. But she's not, as I mentioned, she beside that the ADB operational thing, she has a good understanding about research, and she is quite innovative in bringing the innovation within the ADB and saying how the value added from the every dollar borrowed by any of the government, how that could be enhanced. And so we'll be having Yasmin, welcome here.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the kind introduction, Dr. Mohsin. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Now I will be introducing the Malik Akram Saab, who is the DG on-farm water management. And Malik Akram Saab has more than 30 years of the professional experience in planning, designing, strategizing, coordinating, and implementing on-farm water management project for the irrigated agriculture development. And he's not only, he's a very keen and very passionate about that one, how to improve the productivity at the farm scale level, what are the innovative solutions, how we could apply the innovative technology, not looking on the individual silo at the farm scale level, but how we could go for the area development, at the command area development, what are the innovative techniques, and how the thing could be linking together. Based on my several discussions with him, and even this in the morning, in the previous session, he was quite keen and vocal about that one of the fundamental bottleneck is the integration of the various departments. And that's how that could be enhanced and how that will be leading towards the improving the water productivity. And he has a master degree from Asian Institute of Technology. Thank you. Welcome, sir. Now, moving to my last and very distinguished, water professional, Dr. Abud Bodla. Dr. Abud Bodla is not I will say, in Pakistan, anyone who has worked in Pakistan, they have a really good understanding about professional recognition of the Dr. Abu Balasab. And he's a member of the planning and development as infrastructure, but his background, he spent more than 30 years in water sources management in the research capacity, as well as he did a PhD in water sources management from Colorado State University in 1993. And then he was for the DG of Avastri, and working on over a longer period of time, what are the practical issues in the irrigation sector, how that could be reformed. And now sitting in his new chair as a planning and development member, he's always see that how we could integrate the climate aspect there, and how we could, when we are developing new projects, so projects are not developed in isolation, how that project could be linking with the current existing legislation, whether it's a national water policy or whether it's the Punjab Water Act, and he's always open and sharing the new innovative ideas. Welcome both of us here. Thank you. Now I will be requesting, with that formal introduction of all the panelist members, I will be requesting Dr. Bernhard Tischbein, please, now the floor is to you. Please give the presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for the friendly introduction, and especially for giving the opportunity to me to speak and participate in that really important event. I will give examples to point out concepts, approaches, tools, and integrative steps to raise water productivity. That means we refer to the use of infrastructure.
Bernhard?
Yeah? Can you hear me? Mohsin, you can hear
Dr.
me?
Bernhard, I think maybe the bandwidth is a problem, the internet.
Can you hear me? Mohsin, can you hear me?
We can hear you, but I
Okay.
don't know those in the hall. I don't know.
Thank you, Nawasab.
Can you see the slide?
Yes, we can see the slide.
Yeah. Should I start again, or?
Now, you start from here. We're just saying it, if you could turn off the video, maybe the sound quality will improve. Your video. Okay, please go ahead.
Yeah. Okay.
No.
Okay, then thank you once more for a friendly introduction and for the opportunity to speak at that important event. I will present examples to point out concepts, approaches, tools, and integrative steps to rise water productivity. That means we handle infrastructure in a situation which is becoming more and more complex due to climate change. And important is to center whatever we are doing for productivity around the people. So the structure, a few words on water productivity. I will then go for the case study Khorasan, which is in Uzbekistan in the Aral-Sea Basin. After that, I will come to some examples how irrigation scheduling models can help to improve water productivity, and I will then at the end conclude mainly towards the need of inter or even transdisciplinary approaches. Yeah, just briefly mention my affiliation, that is the Center for Development Research, which is a part of University of Bonn. We are looking in an inter and transdisciplinary way on the process of development, and water research is at the core of these activities. Basically, we monitor the situation, model options, discuss with stakeholders how to implement actions, try to create an enabling environment, make the research sustainable by capacity building, and look in policy dialogue for outreach. Here, this photo I inserted to point out that we have a cooperation since many years with partners in Pakistan, the University of Agriculture in Faisalabad, Punjab Irrigation Department, and also IFMI. Yeah, I think here not much need to point out that we urgently should raise water productivity. The available resources, take Pakistan as an example, are used to a high degree. The future is challenging due to climate change, due to a sharpening competition for water. So there is an urgent need to rise water productivity, or what is the same effect, lower the water footprint. That means we have to decouple agricultural production. We have to raise it decouple from the gross water input needed. So we have to raise production and we have to lower the gross water input. That leads me to the irrigation or water productivity, being the ratio between agricultural yield and gross water irrigation and leaching water input. So improving water productivity means to increase the numerator and to lower the denominator. Raising the agricultural yield can be achieved in terms of water management by making the irrigation appropriate. That means match the true demand of the crops. Lowering the gross irrigation water input without disturbing the yield can be achieved by rising efficiency and making salt management more effective. So that water interventions, they need to be accompanied by interventions in the agricultural system, because that also has a strong impact here on the agricultural yield. Here on the left side, that is basically the structure of irrigation performance assessment, which we use to analyze the situation, detect underlying reasons for underperformance, and then to tackle these underlying reasons by reason-oriented measures. Yeah, here just a conceptual framework. At the core is a physically based modeling, which enables us to appropriately estimate and fulfill the water demand. And by understanding the water application processes, we can improve efficiency of water application, and both together exerts a strong impact towards improving water productivity. Okay, we need a system understanding. That was discussed very much in the morning, the infrastructure, and we need, I will focus in the following more on the ways how to manage, how to handle that infrastructure. And when looking for the implementation, we need to put our concepts in an interdisciplinary context. We need to be impact aware, and at the end we have to integrate our irrigation concepts in basin-wide water management structures. Okay, I will come to the case study Khorasan, which is in the Aral Sea basin, maybe 200 kilometers south of the remainders of the Aral Sea. The Aral Sea, the shrinking Aral Sea, really indicating what is happening if for a long time sustainable management of water resources is neglected. And what we can see from here is still there is a huge water input, 4.4 cubic kilometers per year for an area of 275,000 hectare. For example, the water productivity in cotton is around 0.2 kg per cubic meter. So what we did is analyzing the situation, measuring the problems by indicators. No need to look here for the specific indicators. What I want to point out here is it helps to differentiate different layers. We have the water layer, we have the agricultural layer, we have the economic layer, and we have the institutional layer. That layered system helps to see the interlinkages between the indicators, and that helps to conceive measures for improvement. Because the measures for improvement need to tackle the reasons, and here the reasons for current problems are also sorted in a layered way. Here are reasons in the water system, agricultural reasons in the economic system, and causes in terms of institutional deficits. Once we have differentiated these layers, we can tackle all these reasons in an appropriate and very targeted way. Yeah, the answer to that situation was an interdisciplinary project by CEF, supported by UNESCO, looking on these different fields: natural resources, production systems, economy, and very much important society and institutions. I will give you now some examples on interventions, on single interventions, which are based on modeling. That is maybe a bit approach of a scientist, but our way to tackle problems is analyze the situation, model options to conceive improvements, and then try to implement these options into action with the stakeholders. Yeah, when applying a water flux model, we can improve the irrigation timing. Metaflow models helps to understand accumulation of salts and to conceive appropriate leaching. Models for advanced recession infiltration of water during the irrigation application process can really improve water application. And at the end, linking irrigation scheduling models, groundwater models for the unsaturated zone can help to improve conjunctive use of canal and groundwater. This research was conducted by a former colleague, Dr. Usman Awan, who now is in IFMI. Yeah. These are single measures towards improvement. Now we have to integrate it. I suggest a two-step approach. First step is in the water system, and the second step is then putting the water system into the economic and institutional context. Yeah, again, no need to look here for the numbers. I just want to point out, if we apply improved irrigation timing and net amount, plus advanced water application, plus a better water distribution in the system, we can more or less double the water productivity in that scheme. Second step I mentioned was on institutions. So whatever we are doing in the water field, it relates to a technical system, to the social institutional system, and to the economical system. And currently there is often a downward cycle of water management in water users associations. For example, if there is a low payment of water fees, low income, technical deficiencies increase or become bigger, there's a lack of control, management is insufficient, participation is not really working, and then payment becomes even less, and then there is a really downward cycle, which we have to turn into an upward cycle. For example, in the institutional field of intervention, if we increase participation of stakeholders, we improve the management. That ends up with a higher willingness to pay. That gives a better income to the water user association. They can maintain and operate better the system, and that is then starting a momentum for an upward cycle. So that is an issue which I want to point out here. We have to embed our technical system in that interlinked socio-economical, biophysical context. Yeah, just a few results which we achieved by these model-based and flexible irrigation strategies. It was possible to more or less double the water productivity. That is a huge potential. In order to unfold that potential, we need to provide training, we need to improve participation of water users, we need to strengthen the bottom-up institutions, and an important thing is we should unfold the creativity and the innovation potential of the farmers, of the water end users. And we should provide them with long-term planning reliability. So they need to have a longer-term perspective in order to invest in water-saving technologies. Further aspects which I think are urgently to be considered is we have to link the management of land and water. We could think about alternative options in case our water resources become scarce. Yeah, and what is an important thing is we really have to improve the ways of dissemination, knowledge and innovations. At our CEF, we developed a procedure which we name Follow the Innovation, that tries to understand why innovations work or don't work, what are the barriers, and how can we create an enabling environment. Yeah. Now just a few examples on the irrigation scheduling as a tool to improve water productivity. It is a tool in a double sense for me. First of all, it helps to develop schedules which are appropriate. And the second advantage is it can be used as a discussion tool to bring together disciplines, crop, atmosphere, water, soil, and the actors from these disciplines. So it can be used to integrate, fuse perspectives, and by that enhance participation. Okay, second core element is to advance water application process. Here we have to look on the measures related to the irrigation itself, the features of the field, and we have to consider these indirect factors, crop selections. We need to motivate the irrigator, we need to provide training, we need to provide incentives. So there is a lot of intervention needed going beyond the water. In the water, we have, you know them better than I, all these technical measures. If we go for furrow irrigation, we can block it, we can apply cutback, surge flow, alternate furrow. There are a lot of technical things which need to be brought into an overall concept, combining irrigation scheduling, improving application process, and creating an enabling environment. In Pakistan, this is very fine developed. You have the laser guided leveling, you have the raised bed, so that is at hand. What I want to point out here is we need to combine all these interventions. Yeah, two examples now on how we can use the irrigation scheduling model. First example comes from a cotton irrigation area in western Turkey named Söke. Here we can basically use the model to consider the spatial variability of water demand, soil, the temporal variability from season to season. We can analyze how practice schedules refer to optimal ones, and we can minimize the impact of a non-avoidable undersupply by controlled deficit irrigation. Just to give you one example, taking into consideration different soils enables to determine the number of irrigation events. Or if there is a year with more rain, we can adapt the irrigation schedule. Okay, here that is controlled deficit irrigation. Imagine there is an undersupply here in that situation. Then, in case you cut your irrigation amounts proportionally at each event, what is possible in that case, because in the circuit system there is the option to use reservoirs, then you can limit your yield loss. In the optimal situation, you have a yield of 4.6 ton per hectare. If you have the gap at the end, you go down to 3.8 with the controlled deficit irrigation. Using the same amount of irrigation water, you can still achieve 4.2 ton per hectare, so you could avoid a loss of 0.2 ton per hectare. Last example from a project in a cotton grow in Punjab. What I want to point out here is the Varabandi system surely will stay in place, but with the irrigation scheduling models, we can assist farmers within farm water allocation. For example, if the storage capacity of soil allows, one could think about not irrigate at each Varabandi turn, but at each second Varabandi turn. And the benefit would be we shift here, that is the green one is the irrigation at each second turn. We shift or we lower the unproductive evaporation, raise the productive transpiration, here raise the productive transpiration, and by that we increase the yield with the same irrigation amount. That translates then in a water productivity gain. Yeah, last two slides. When improving efficiency, productivity, we achieve a lot of win-win effects going beyond water. Here the blue ones are the water benefits. The green ones is benefit in agriculture. For example, if we improve efficiency, we have a better uniformity, we get a more uniform growing of crops. Saving water is saving energy. We save labor, and at the end, reducing the cross water needed. We can also reduce water conflict potential in the scheme stop against tail and in the transboundary situation. To unfold that potential, we need an interdisciplinary combination of interventions. That is my conclusion at the end. We have interventions here marked by blue color in the water field, ranging from monitoring, from modeling, to creating an enabling environment by laser-guided leveling. We have the agricultural interventions, conservation agriculture, for example. We have the economic tools we need to support water saving by Boni-Mali systems. And what is very much important, we need strengthening of institutions, enable the water end user to unfold his innovation potentials, and giving him planning reliability so that he really is willing to invest in in water saving. With that conclusion, I would like to close and thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Dr. Bernhard, for giving a very comprehensive presentation and then highlighting that sharing the examples around the globe, Turkey, Uzbekistan, and Pakistan. And one of the fundamental, the point which you have mentioned is about the interdisciplinary approach when we are proposing any new intervention, how that the technical intervention is supported by the multiple sectors there, and how we could include the socioeconomic things and as well as along with the biophysical thing and institutional setup. Thank you very much. There will be chance for anyone who's going to ask a question from Dr. Bernhard, but that will be in a question and answering session. Now moving to the panelists. So I will be asking 3 sets of questions from the 4 panelists and requesting each panelist to provide a very brief response about that one and then try to cover in 3 minutes, 3 to 4 minutes maximum. Thank you. So my first question is to Malik Akram sir, to you. The water productivity in Pakistan is low. That's a known fact if we compare with the other countries. But now, what do you believe that using the traditional method we can improve the water productivity at the farm gate? Or do you believe that there is a need to use innovative techniques for leading toward the modernizing agriculture at the farm gate, and that's ultimately improving the water productivity? Where we are standing now, what's the way forward? Thank you.
Doctor, thank you very much. Basically, Doctor, there are, as you know, there are 3 water competitors. The one is the domestic use, which is almost 5%, and then industrial use 3%, and almost 92% water being used in agriculture. Doctor, if your basic question is regarding that. Currently, we are doing the flood irrigation system. Whether there is a potential to improve the water productivity living in the existing border irrigation, living within the existing flood irrigation system on a border type farms. Yes and no. The first thing is why it's no, because currently the flood irrigation system has only 40 to 50% water efficiency. Whereas, sir, this can be improved significantly living within, if we do some hand holding of the farmers. As in the morning, Ms. Rabia said that the capacity building of the farmers is the key element. So I think we should enhance the water productivity living within the flood irrigation system. How? The first thing is, I have the experiments at my farm at Malakurt. If you simply laser level the field, you can enhance the 50 to 70%, 55% to 70% water productivity. If you shift on the same crop with the high efficiency irrigation system, then you can go up to the 140 to 150% increase in the water productivity. I have the data, I have the experiments. So, actually, there is a need to enhance the water productivity living within this flood irrigation system. But we have to see the crop, climate, crop, water, and soil relationship. Soil matters a lot. If your soil quality, if there is a salinity in the soil or soil quality is not good, then you cannot enhance the water productivity. If you have a water of the bad quality, you also cannot enhance the water productivity. So, because in Pakistan, our system was designed on the 67% cropping intensity. We have the inherently short water. So what we have done, we augment our canal water, our surface water with the groundwater pump. So with the pumpage of the groundwater, now currently we are using almost 50% from the groundwater and 50% from the canal. So what happened over the years? Over the years, two things happened. One is the groundwater mining, and the second is the deterioration of groundwater quality. Groundwater quality was deteriorated due to the intrusion of the brackish groundwater pockets to the fresh groundwater pockets, where there was maximum pumpage. So water quality nowadays, I have the data that almost 60 to 7% tables in the Punjab from 1.2 million tables, 60 to 70% tables have the either unfit water or marginally fit water for irrigation. So that's why even you can give the optimal resources, optimal inputs of the water as well as of the nutrients. So you cannot get the water productivity increase. So this is the as mentioned in this presentation, the recent presentation. So there is a close relationship between the climate, then crop, then the water and the. So I think we need, first thing is we need to educate the farmer, create the awareness, educate the farmer like this. There are a number of ways to increase the water productive irrigation, the flood irrigation system. Number one, you can use the borders. You can educate the farmers. Your water is such and such. How much water is available with you? Which is your soil type? Okay, so what would be design of your border? What would be width of your border? What would be length of your border? This is one way you design the border irrigation system. Then the next step under the water irrigation system is you can have the concept of cut-off stream. When normally the farmer, what is the farmer is doing? The farmer is just giving the water from only one outlet to a basin of 1 acre. So you first educate him to make the borders and then ask him, if you have the clay soil, then your cut-off stream time is 65% of the total lead. Suppose the length of the border is 100 feet. So when the water reaches at the 65% length of the border, then you cut off that stream. The second step is if there is a clay loamy soil, then 75% cut off stream time. If there is a sandy soil, then 90% you have cut off stream time. This is the way. The third thing is the water budgeting and crop budgeting. You must make the water budgeting. What is the availability of water from all three sources? From canal, from groundwater, and from rain. What is required as per cropping pattern of that area? What is gap? How to bridge that gap? How the farmers are existently bridging that gap? So then you should, this is a process for optimization in fact. You have to optimize all the resources. You have to optimize the water, you have to optimize the nutrients, you have to optimize the crops. And then if you see in the Pakistan nowadays, the maximum loss, if you take the example of sugar cane is a water guzzler. Its water productivity is 10,000 liters per kg. And if you see the rice, its water productivity is 3,000 kg per liter, 3,000 liters per kg. And if after the sugar cane and rice, there is the low crop productivity of the wheat. And this is the major loss in the wheat. Why the area of the wheat is major area? We are growing the wheat on the 16 million acres. So this is so why how the farmer, because of the practice, if we see the seedbed preparation, the farmer here is not using the drills. The farmer here is not, because the farmer has the very short window between the rice harvest and other crop harvest and between the next crop. Okay, so he just without leveling the land, he just gave the water, and that is the maximum loss occurred in the field. Secondly, in the case of wheat, the farmer is losing much water in the first irrigation because crop always take water with respect to rooting depth. So during the first irrigation, the farmer always gave the 4 inches water, whereas need is only half inch water. So what is happening when the farmer gives 4 inches water? So then the whole nutrients he is applying 1 bag of urea, and all the urea is prone to leach. So all the urea is leached on. So the water productivity has become low.
Thank you for giving them just the key. I mean, the learning from Malik Saab message is about when we are looking around, we need to understand the crop, climate, soil, and water availability. And then if you will have the information on the water budgeting and then the crop budgeting, and then pointing it to the area where we are growing the crop, and if that area is suitable, that will help us a lot for farmers, also giving the opportunity to the farmers to improve the productivity, and with the added the raising awareness or some kind of the capacity building of the farmers, training of trainers could help us. Thank you. Moving to the next question is to Yasmin Siddiqui from ADB. Typically, when we are in the Western countries, or even in our neighboring countries, when the governments are borrowing any loan or any kind of grant, then they typically is they are looking around how they could be, for every dollar which is borrowed, how that they could optimize that the value of that the dollar borrowed to improve the water productivity. I would like to ask a question from Yasmin. What are the ADB thinking in using innovation and remote sensing technology for water productivity enhancement in a river basin so that the value addition of each dollar borrowed lead to get more value of water? Obviously, there are many other factors there, but just saying what are the ADB thinking in innovative ways? Thank you. Yasmin, to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mohsin. And before I start to respond to your question, maybe I can greet our dear colleagues from Government of Punjab. I can see Minister Sahab is there, Secretary Irrigation, Dr. Bodla, and Mr. Nawaz. Very nice to meet you all. And thank you very much to IMI and USAID for inviting ADB to this very important event. We're so pleased to learn about this peer-to-peer learning that's been initiated through the joint efforts with Government of Punjab. And we consider it to be a very important way to share the knowledge, the learning and experiences from one province to another. So now in response to your question, Dr. Mohsin, I made a few points on this, and I'd like to share briefly that ADB is already working in 10 countries on driving innovations, particularly for remote sensing technologies in water accounting and water productivity. So in addition to working in Pakistan on this, in partnership again with IMI and FAO, we've already introduced remote sensing in countries such as Vietnam, Cambodia, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and that's just to name a few. So for us, innovation and introduction of technology is a key area of our strategy 2030. This is ADB's vision document for the future. And most important is to embed it into the investment projects. As you mentioned, for every dollar that's borrowed by a country, it's very important for us to have that value addition element. And with Secretary Irrigation, we often discuss this. It's crucial, I would say, from both sides. There's a responsibility from our side as a development bank and a partner to bring those latest technologies and innovations and share them with our client countries. Importantly, and I would like to urge our colleagues who are present from the various governments, please also demand it of us. I know from working in other countries, the question always asked to us is, what is the finance plus element? What do you bring as value addition? So I see it as that partnership between the three of us, between the government, who is our client, the development bank, and the knowledge partner, that between the three of us, we should all be demanding this of each other. How can we add the best value to the country and to ultimately who are our beneficiaries? I always say this, the farmers at the end of the system are our beneficiaries, and we're here to serve them. So this is very crucial for us. Secondly, Dr. Mohsin, as I discussed with you, within ADB as well, there's an important message that we've been driving over the past few years, which is to move away from these concepts of let's measure efficiency or let's just measure the yield per hectare of crop grown. And let's move towards this concept of productivity, which is the dollar per cubic meter, and adding that concept that water has an economic value. So we've been really driving that message within the bank as well. And I'm pleased that many of the projects that we see today are embedding that concept of value of water, economic value of water, as a measurable indicator. And this is where remote sensing technology and also other technologies can really enhance a project. Lastly, just while we're touching upon technologies, aside from remote sensing, I'm very keen as well to see how we can drive digital agriculture and irrigation management support through improved flow monitoring, the use of smart metering for groundwater management. And this is already being demonstrated in countries like Bangladesh and Vietnam, where ADB has introduced through its projects the concept of having a smart meter where you can load your card. A farmer can go to a small kiosk, load sufficient money onto a card and pay up front for groundwater. So these type of technologies are already being applied in other countries, and we're very keen to see that same technology being applied in Pakistan. And we have the experience. We can draw on knowledge partners such as IMI as well to support us in this. Lastly, and importantly, I believe this was a point made by the earlier panelist as well. Capacity building is vital. And it's not just the capacity building of the organizations that we work directly with, but also capacity building of the end user. I see both of these as equally important. And for us at ADB, this is another area of importance and significance that we are building into our projects. We're already working with Punjab Irrigation Department on a very important and I would say pioneering piece of work, which is the transformation of the irrigation department into a water resources department. This has brought us a tremendous opportunity to work closely with the irrigation department. And I'd like to see also greater efforts being made at the field level and also with the agriculture department, that we continue to embed that concept of capacity building, which goes hand in hand with introducing technologies. I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yasmin, for giving a very comprehensive answer. Yes, there are many technologies, and then with all the technologies, and if those technologies are tested, how we could apply those technologies in part of Pakistan if those have not been adopted. And digital agriculture is one of the technology, and smart metering. And then you also bring the very important thing is the key messages about that, how that the TRICA, the partnership, the development, the donors and development partners on one side, the knowledge partnership, and then leading towards that the government, how we are able to meet the needs of the government and all sort of thing. And I will touch base later on this particular question and dive in a bit more details just to ask you what could be done. Thank you. Now I'm moving to the next panelist, Dr. Abu Balasab. We know that when the water productivity is low, that's a known fact over the last, there has been a lot of things have been done, but now the question is, considering the climate change, which is one of the other factors there, and water availability is getting less. We know we have a known fact there that we have a less storage, water storage at the moment, but that will be improved. What are the three things which government need to do, especially the planning and development department, from your perspective? What are the three things that could be done to improve the water productivity?
Yeah, this is, I think, a very critical aspect which you have. Yeah, Dr. Mohsin. This aspect of low water productivity has been, in fact, indicated as one of the major sobering facts in Dr. John Briscoe's famous Pakistan's Water Economy Running Dry publication of the World Bank. And this has a multitude of influences. Some of those were indicated here as influences which are environmental influences, which are relating to absence of optimized irrigation scheduling. And by token of that, then there comes this question of not having optimized crop production function because of our negligence to enhancing water use efficiencies and optimizing cut-off time. One thing which Marika Karam Saab referred to is always very valid, that in flood irrigation, in our system where we have this basin irrigation, we don't have opportunity to the reuse of tailwater runoff, neither to control of advance and recession of waterfronts, and not to deep percolation losses, which are characteristic of basin irrigation. Now, with all these factors, where we have where we see saline water intrusion, critical groundwater management environment, where we have water table depletion, this looming effect of climate change, which is posed in your question, is very, very important in context of the fact that EC mode studies have reflected that because of higher glacial melt, there would be accretion of river flows and then perhaps canal water withdrawals also by an extent of 20% with a mere rise of 0.15%, 0.15 degrees Celsius in temperature, which means that this dearth of major water storages to give us capacity to regulate water is now coming as a threat to very survival. Because if on the one side we have higher inflows, higher water withdrawals, those are going to lead to floods and devastation due to floods. And at the same time, these periods of excess water withdrawals or water flows are likely to be followed by drought periods, drought decades, in fact, decades of drought, which would tend to lead to, God forbid, perishing the whole irrigation and the relevant civilization or livelihood here. So in fact, these looming effects of climate change, and then the recent FAO study, which has altered our agroclimatic zones in Punjab. This calls for revision of our water allowances or water duties in canal zones, in all canal zones, because these are outdated and these have led to water logging in certain areas where we have higher water allowances or water duty, and these have led to, in fact, water scarcity combined with accentuated sodicity of soils, which is irreversible. So those kinds of factors are to be integrated into our integrated water resources management framework. This integrated water resources management framework, which has building blocks of all uses of water, is in fact in a very abysmal or dismal condition unless we enforce it through a well-knit groundwater regulation framework, a well articulated and implemented Water Act, which Irrigation Department through its efforts has brought about. But then this Water Act has to be complemented with other uses of water, efficiency in other uses of water, especially in urban domestic water supplies and sewerage, and in regional, on regional level in agriculture. So in fact, one of the things which Dr. Bernard was referring in his keynote address, a very illustrious address, in fact, that was on institutional side. I would also emphasize that our efforts have to be now integrated very well, keeping cognizance to these modified agroclimatic zones in Punjab and in whole of the country, these revised water allowances or water duty, and then on all measures for optimizing water use efficiencies. This also includes structural measures like canal lining, but then we have to undertake a very, I think, a very thoughtful research on canal lining as well, and on all water conservation measures. This groundwater recharge is one of the flagship, you can say, targets and objectives in this government. But then groundwater regulation has to take care of ecological aspects of our rivers also. After partitioning this subcontinent, 2 rivers or 3 rivers, Satluj, Byas and Ravi, ceased to flow, which led to dried out river basins in major parts of Punjab. And then if we do not have this command area management in Potoha and replenishing of these river basins by addressing problems of our link canals, then we are in fact at a great loss. But the hope, the comfort is that irrigation department, through its in fact very high knowledge-based traditions, and with its whole program of perspective planning, has always carved out master plans. And this and after this government was set up, irrigation department has again come up with a short-term and long-term master plan, and that includes optimizing investment strategies as well. So I think the whole environment is quite conducive, but we have to bring in this integrated water resources management in a well-knit nexus of climate change, as well as these problems of groundwater depletion, of surface water scarcity, and of these issues of revision of water allowances.
Thank you, Abu Balasab. I mean, for elaborating on the climate shocks and then the future consequences, how that will be the future consequences. And you're absolutely right, there is need of evidence-based knowledge information that could be for revising the water allowance, as well as looking around the crop suitability and the work which is done, and how that could be applied into the context, into the field. Just moving to that, the next question, which I will be asking the Minister Sahab, Mohsen Laghari Sahab. So there are 2 speakers already talked about, 2 panelists already talked about the raising of water awareness and water. You have also mentioned that the raising awareness is necessary, first to the general public and as well as to the politicians. What IMI as an institute in partnership with P&D, or with that what we could do even for the KP, or what sort of the generic information is it, which is raising the awareness to the politicians? Because I'm lucky today that you're sitting here, so I want to know how we could raise the awareness to the political circle about the water as a priority.
Despite the myth that most of the parliamentarians are from rural background, The reality now is that most of the parliamentarians are from the urban center, and the real estate market seems to be dominating the parliament houses now. And most of the parliamentarians who are also from the rural areas are generally, there are exceptions, but generally big landlords and absentee landlords. So they really don't have that much of a connection with the ground realities. Although from rural areas also, there's this class of traders and all who are coming into the parliament now. Raising awareness would require that there should be some kinds of interaction with them. And for the general public, I think the biggest tool that we have right now, because nobody reads anymore. We don't read newspapers, we don't read books. Everybody watches TV. Maybe a short TV campaign for the farmers in local languages, maybe for the regional, in Sindh, it should be in Sindhi, in Saraiki, in Punjabi, in Pashto, and that could be a tool. And then radio stations are everywhere now. There are FM stations everywhere, even in the rural areas, in small towns. We could pass this message on effectively to people, through the farmers, that the plant needs a certain amount of water. Just like me, a human being, 8 glasses of water would be enough for me in a day. If I drink 20 glasses of water, maybe that wouldn't really help, and it might even hurt. So excess watering would maybe hurt the yield of the crop. So they need to be made aware of that. Other than that, you can't really force people. One thing that also seems to be very difficult is charge people appropriately for them to have some value for it. When WAPDA charges us a good amount of money, we make sure that we switch off the extra lights. We keep when we have to pay the bill, we keep the thermostat at 25, 27, depending on how it is, so that it doesn't get very cold. And if it isn't charged much, then we are very, very careless with it. So similarly, there are different approaches that we can take. We can show them how less water or enough water is good for a crop, how water is being wasted. If you start charging, then they will also have a concern to minimize their profits, so they will maybe use it less. But there can be a multi-pronged approach to this. Thank you.
Now that, thanks for sharing this insight. Now that will bring me to the next series of questions, which is I'm asking first from Dr. Banhart. You're an academia person. You have been talking about in your presentation that many of the things, modern ways, techniques, framework, models, and all sort of it, but on the ground, those have not been translated most of the time when we are looking around the area. So one of the concept is about the water accounting. And then the water accounting or water budgeting, that's really good. But then when we are looking around any government agency for their decision making, how that's not well adopted adopted by the government agency and the water accounting, especially in the considering the surface water, groundwater, and as well as the rainwater, everything. What are the bottlenecks, are the gaps that output from proven framework or technologies which could be used in planning so that we will get the desired output? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Mohsin. From my point of view, I think the concepts are in place, the technologies are also known. What is missing is we need to improve our data systems. We still do not monitor enough. We still do not appropriately analyze the data. We have the indicators. It was just mentioned by Ms. Yasmin. We have to rethink our indicators. So we have to put it into the context of the people. We have the new tools. Remote sensing surely will help, especially in a larger scale water allocation. We have the digitalization. What I'm thinking is we have to bring together more than in the past scientists and practitioners and end users of water to find ways which of these innovations can be used for which purpose. So we have to think from the end. What do we want to achieve? And the end is the water application discharge to the field over a time. How good can we control it? How good is the dosage? And that gives then an idea how precise we have to model, how much, which model, how which data we need. So let's say for me, the major reason for not dissemination of these concepts is that we need a better co-design, a better joint experimentation of the scientists and the farmers, including the donors, that was also mentioned in, just before, and we need to include the decision makers, because they somehow set the frame of what is happening on the ground. So we have to combine a bottom-up approach, starting with the farmers, and a top-down approach, setting the frames. So what I could imagine, let's conclude me with two issues. One is to structure these cooperation between the different groups. We could use an approach which we name that follow the innovation approach. Innovation might be a technique, might be a strategy, might be a concept like water accounting. That's not too much important at that point. Follow the innovation approach means that we, together with the stakeholders, with the practitioners, decide which innovations are promising. We do a joint experimentation, and then we rethink again, is it suitable for dissemination, needs it to be modified? And then we try to find out what are barriers, what are enabling environments, and then we combine all these interventions. Because what is also very much important, whatever we are doing in the water management field, we tackle an interlinked system. For example, if we want to introduce deficit irrigation, we might be forced to do that more due to climate change, what was just mentioned. So if you want to go for deficit irrigation, we need a better dosage of the water in the field, because otherwise the non-uniformity of water application is deteriorating the yield, because with the deficit irrigation we go to closer to the limit. So we have to link all these interventions. And last remark from my side is we have to bring people together from the different disciplines and different categories, and the earlier we begin with that, the better it will work. Here I see an important role of young scientists, of master students going to the field and getting in a view what is needed in the real world, and then we can combine these new tools, the smartphones, the computers, the software, the digitalization, with the real needs on the ground. So we need to strengthen that dialogue at the place.
Thank you, Dr. Bernhard, for giving a very comprehensive answer. Just to wrap up the things on this one, that you highlighted again the interdisciplinary approach and bringing the people, the society together, and that will help us in going for the innovation. So we are looking not only the farmers, but also from a top down, from a policy maker, and both of these things will be working together. Moving to my next panelist, Malik Akram Saab, and I'm also looking around the time because I don't want to take the time from the next session. So considering that one, I will be requesting if you could just be very brief so that at the end we will have a 10 minutes for the audience who are sitting here, they could ask the question. Malik sir, we already talked about that the Punjab Water Act is there. Before that, the lunch, you mentioned about the horizontal and vertical integration of various departments is one of the issues there. Now, just considering that the Punjab Water Act, how that legislation will assist you to achieve the target, which is ultimately improving the water productivity, and how you could play the role in the Punjab Water Act, and especially if you could highlight that the top 3 priorities from your department where you could play a role for the as a part of the Punjab Water Act in implementation on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saab. Actually, I think the horizontal and vertical linkages are critical for enhancing the water productivity, and do believe that water productivity can be improved with the integration. So, as far as the Water Act is concerned, yes, Water Act is a comprehensive document where all the stakeholders have been involved under the Water Commission or the Water Delivery Service Authority. So I think Agriculture Department is there, WASA is there, and above all, there is a regulatory framework for the groundwater. So groundwater, and when mostly we are using the conjective water, groundwater as well as the canal water. So definitely the Water Act will help a lot in the integration, horizontal and vertical integration. But I feel still currently there is a lack of coordination among us, the researchers, among us, the academia, and the field formations. So I think with the Water Act will help for the horizontal and vertical integration. So at the time of framing of the rules of business, because each department is regulated through the rules of business 2011, which define the mandate of each institution, mandate of each department. So I think at the time of framing the rules of business 2011 for each department, there should be a clear-cut brainstorming and discussion. So I think that would also help a lot. So under the Water Act, all stakeholders will join hands, and definitely there will be improvement in water productivity.
Thank you, Malik sir. Just in terms of one last thing, what will be the 3 top things, the priorities from the agriculture and the unfarmed water department, which will help to implement the unfarmed water management, the Punjab Water Act on the ground?
Yes, under the Water Act, there is a not clear-cut role of the unfarmed water management, but there is a coordination of the Agriculture Department. But I foresee that because everything starts from the Water Course Command. From the canal water, the Irrigation Department make the allocation at the outlet level, and there are all the tubers are in the Water Course Command. And third thing is the rainwater also in the Water Course Command. So I think the on-farm water should given a clear-cut role in the groundwater management, groundwater use, and groundwater mapping, so that we can join hands with the Irrigation Department, and we can help them in the tagging of the tubers. And next step will come in the energy conservation, energy audit. On-farm water management has a hierarchical infrastructure at the field level. So we can help the Irrigation Department in this energy audit, then the tagging of the tubers, and the groundwater use. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, very much. Just moving to the next panelist, Yasmin. In the previous question, you emphasized that one way there is need a partnership, the knowledge partners as well as with the government, and then you also talked with between donors and then the client. My question is, how do you see the alliance of the development donors with the Research for Development Organization to extract the real benefits of water sector investment for operationalization of developing practical water management solutions in Pakistan.
Thank you, Dr. Mohsin. Thank you for the interesting question. Now, of course, from ADB's side, in terms of what I'd mentioned earlier, strategic document, strategic vision to 2030, the importance of partnerships is very much highlighted. It's not a new area of work. ADB has worked consistently in partnership with key partners and organizations such as the International Water Management Institute, World Wide Fund for Nature, to name a few. So even in Pakistan today, much of the work we're doing is in collaboration with knowledge partners. We have recent experience in other provinces of collaboration, including with IMI USAID on some prior work for the Kurumtangi project in KP province. We have IMI support again with us in Punjab and also at federal level with the Federal Water Resources Ministry on considering opportunities for institutional strengthening and capacity building. So in terms of what we achieved through that partnership, this is what you and I had discussed a few days ago. And I think this is the point that I'd like to just link back into one of the opening points made by Dr. Bernard as well, which is what are we trying to achieve as the outcome? What is the outcome of that partnership? And this is where I do see it critically important. Partnership for me is government, development partner, user, and of course the knowledge institution as well. What I'm finding at times can happen is the translation of knowledge into practical solutions is a key constraint. And it's one that I see particularly as an example. I'll give you the water accounting as an example where we can often have a very detailed piece of research work which develops a detailed research-oriented document. But if I am going to sit with Secretary Punjab Irrigation, I need to give him 3 key messages. That this is what you need to do, Secretary Saab, this is how your system can perform better. And that's where I see this real importance of working collaboratively. How do we translate research, data analysis, and knowledge into practical messaging that we can deliver to the clients, and the clients can also discuss back with us. I would have to say that maybe for many of us who come from engineering backgrounds, we may not be the best in messaging, but it's definitely an area where I would see those who come from decision-making, administration, we also need their inputs to say to us again, can you give me 3 key messages here? Lastly, I think what is important as well, I was just taking some notes here, and I do think it's important to think about participation. Again, I'm talking about Dr. Bernard's point, and I'll just be brief here. I realize time is a constraint. But I remember in the 90s, participatory irrigation management was a key theme, a key word. Everything was about PIM. In fact, a lot of what even some of the prior major initiatives were in countries like Pakistan, the work IMI was doing, the research work that was happening in Punjab, this was pioneering work across the globe. And it was around PIM and it was about participation. I see that there's a scope to revive that. And I do see that as part of knowledge and partnership. Unless we understand what the end user is wanting, what does the system need to deliver to that person, we're going to get lost into the details and depths of analysis and research. And it doesn't matter how much technology we apply there, but if we don't understand what that farmer's need is, I see that we're on a slippery path. So for me, revival of some of those principles of PIM are really important. And as I said, Punjab, Pakistan was a pioneer in this area of work. I'd like to see that revived again. Thank you.
Thank you. Just the last question to that from the panelist, Dr. Abu Balasab, that for the Punjab Water Act, it has been clearly mentioned that there is a water needed for the multi-sectors, for the cities, and even when we are looking at the city like Lahore, and they are typically dependent on the groundwater. And then if we want to divert if we are thinking about diverting the water from agriculture sector, which is typically using it, and they will not have the more water available in future due to all the limited water availability and everything. So what's the appetite at the planning and development as a part of that, the Punjab Water Act, reallocate the water from agriculture sector towards the industry, which is paying a bit more high value of water. The industry could pay high value of water, or even to the domestic people. Then they could pay a bit more high value, and that will be leading towards the improving the productivity.
Yeah. In fact, this long-term answer to this would come through that CDT, a Capacity Development Technical Assistance, which Asian Bank has provided to Irrigation Department on synthesizing functioning as well as objective-wise strategies for both irrigation and agriculture department. As a whole, following this integrated water resources management framework, the first example is that for Lahore City on demand from WASA, from Housing and Urban Development Department, Irrigation Department did apportion 100 cusics for surface water induction to meet water supply shortages in Lahore. And for that, the first project is in progress in terms of laying out its after feasibility or complete design for intake structure. And this water will be delivered from BRBD canal. But at the same time, because in those areas where water command of this canal lies, which is Lahore and Kasur district, the water allowance, which is already, I think, sir, very modest there. There is a likelihood of having some kind of impinging upon that modest water allowance. So Irrigation Department has worked out another project or program to enhance capacity of passage of flow or water from BRBD by adding another 1 or 2 barrels to BRBD siphon. That would augment its capacity. The final demand from WASA, Lahore, is something like 700 cusic. And that demand is in fact going to be intensified through this program of River Ravi urban development project. But like you said, the problem has repercussions, can have repercussions on agricultural land. So again, I would refer to my earlier suggestion on revising our water allowances realistically, but that would be then catered through this augmenting strategies like augmenting of BRBD. There is a program on canal remodeling for which irrigation through another financing facility from Asian Development Bank, which is known as Project Readiness Facility. They are working on design of link canals remodeling. So then there are other programs which would in fact lead to expansion of extension and expansion of irrigation system in downstream Bahalpur and Bahalnagar in Cholistan, in lesser Cholistan and in greater Cholistan. So those would be, I think, major ingredients of water productivity increase as well. But yes, the solution would lie in a real modeling of integrated water resources management framework with all this water flux modeling and water salinity modeling, which Dr. Bernard was referring to.
Thank you, sir. Now, just want to ask to see if is there any question online? No? Okay, so now I'll be asking the 3 questions from the floor. Anyone who's interested? Yes, sir. Uh,
Thank you very much. My name is Nasir Kapoor Khan. I'm Chief Engineer, North Khyber Pakhtunkhwa Government. A very nice presentation, Ji. I just wanted to know, because our farmers have within our department, we feel that we do have a disconnect of information with them immediately as per their requirement. Do we have any communication, implementation, and behavioral change strategy being taken care of in this transformation process? Because especially the bigger farmers, they do have access to technology and they change according to their economic situations. But the poor farmers are still practicing the same old traditional way of farming. So is there any communication, implementation, and behavioral change strategy being looked into? Thank you.
Thank you, Nasir sir. Alex sir. Please, we are just shortage of time.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So the first thing, innovation always starts from the progressives. The first thing. We have secondly, we have the strategy is concerned. Nowadays, we are doing work of the water course improvement, laser line leveling, sprinkler and drip irrigation system. So for the water course improvement, you know that this is the community work, and we have developed a strategy. Rather, we have the community-led implementation model. Here we have developed, the government has pre-qualified the service provider from the private sector for all 3 or 4 interventions. For water course improvement, we established the pre-cast manufacturing yards, and for the high efficiency irrigation system, we have the pre-qualified firms. And for this laser line, we also have the private service providers. Okay, so actually, in the high efficiency irrigation system, for the small farmers, we have made different combinations. Our facility, subsidy facility is we have 4 combinations, up to 3 acres, up to 5 acres, up to 10 acres, and up to 15 acres. The upper slab is 15 acres. So 3 acres for orchards, 3 acres for vegetables, and 3 acres for other crops. Then 5 acres for all 3 crops. Then 10 acres for all 3 crops. In this way, all the farmers are being looked after. So because the larger farmer as well as the smaller farmers. Secondly, from the non-development side, we are providing the laser leveling financial assistance. So we are giving only to the farmer which has the 5 acre or below land. So that the upper farmers have already getting the benefit from the laser units, because we are providing laser units at the district level and we have the balloting system. So each and the farmers having the land of less than 12.5 acre can apply for the laser land leveler units. Up till now, the current government has the vision that there should be a laser leveler in each village. So we have 22,000 villages, and up till now we have provided 15,000 laser land levelers. So every community, starting from the low farmers, the small land holding to the upper land holding, all are being addressed under this category because through the balloting process. At the district level, and deputy commissioner concerned is the chairman of that balloting.
Thank you. Other sir.
Yes, sir. My sir question is basically on the myth that we should give much money and invest much more on the water resources, as per the water policy that every year we should increase percentage of investment for the sector. But why not we invest on transferring and translating technology towards farmers. Because once, every morning, when you go to the gate of your house, you get pamphlets of what about tuition center, beauty parlor, and pizza service. But does the farmers receive such kind of information at their doorstep that if they use or they are using sprinkler irrigation or drip irrigation, or they have their own system of using laser leveling, they can get investment, or they can get at door service the repair, or they can get the equipment on installments for this kind of. So we should bifurcate our investment. Instead of investing much on the physical infrastructure, we should use the available water to increase productivity by investing on much on delivering the service to the farmer. Because if government departments give service, such kind of service, I don't think this will work for a long time. Because if we give them service, such kind of services at their doorstep, that if they use such kind of services, they get soft loans, and with that repair and service at their doorstep from the service providers, this will work much more. Instead of just all of us know, I think from last 30 years, I know that there is high efficiency system, there is laser leveling, but we have failed to provide such services at the doorstep of the farmer.
Thank you, Sir. Just considering, I will be requesting Malik Sahab, considering we are overrunning, if you give it less than 1 minute, very brief response, because many of the things which you have asked, Malik Sahab already talked, and then we could have offline discussion.
Sir, I have already earlier said that I have a community-based private sector-led implementation model. We have, up till now, we have pre-qualified almost 150 service providers, and those are firms, those are not individual persons. If we see the individual person, that's why if we see the example of the laser line leveler, we are just providing the laser unit to a farmer, the farmer who is already maintaining a fleet of equipment already in the village, in the union council, or in the tahsil. So we have number of service providers. We have totally shifted our activities from the public sector to the private sector. So this is in all cases. So secondly, what is the investment on the sharing of investment is concerned. We have reduced the now sharing of the water course improvement. We have more gone to the technology. We have started our journey from the other water courses. Then lining of water we started, and afterwards we have imported a laser line leveler unit, indigenized it, and then we commercialize it. And afterwards we gone to the sprinkler and drip irrigation system. Now we are at the when to irrigate and how much to irrigate scheduling, soil moisture gadgets, and we have almost the thing which can be done and which is being introduced, which is being done in the world. The Pakistan is in better position as compared to Australia and other countries. We are better off than those regarding the water productivity. Although their water productivity is higher, but water losses in Australia are much more than the Pakistan. Thank you.
So the last is Raza. That's the last question, and then I know that when there are 3 panelists, two from US and Nawaz from Islamabad are waiting.
Thank you very
Yes,
much.
please.
My name is Muinuddin. I'm Chief Engineer, Potohar, Irrigation Department. My first question is directed towards Mr. Ban. He has carried out some development studies in Kazakhstan in the basin of Aral Sea. Aral Sea is one of the most stressed basins in the world. Aral Sea has almost disappeared. and there are tensions between the riparian countries, Afghanistan, Kazakhstan, and downstream. My question is that whether there is any study, because in the pictures I could see the flood watering and flood irrigation system is being adopted in these countries, whereas these are water stressed countries. And Afghanistan is now claiming its share on Amu Darya. So when Afghanistan is not getting water from that side, Afghanistan's pressure on Kabul River will increase. So is there any study on the revival of this basin in such a way that it performs for all the shareholders in an equitable way and without causing less or minimum damages to the other riparians? This is.
Sorry? So that's the question is about that the damage for the, I mean, you're talking about the broader context for this, the RLC and then also the Afghanistan and all sort of things. There's the Amu Darya River. To me, one of the fundamental issues, there has been some studies done in other part of the world, even in Amu Darya, but then the biggest issue is about the data availability. There are limited data availability, and then the water data is, there is no cooperation agreement between one state, one country to the other country, and that's one of the problem. But I will let Bernard to give a response. Bernard, to you.
Maybe a very quick answer because we are limited in time. I think you are absolutely right that we have to improve the irrigation performance. Our approach, which we suggested, is two-step procedure. First, try to optimize the system which is in place. That means advance the handling of the furrow system. And the second step is then, if you have specific crops which justify it from the economic background and from the biophysical system, then you can think about a change of technology. But if you change technology, then you need to completely rethink your agricultural system. So that is a process which is ongoing. And then for the last issue, or the second issue, was on that coordination. The Central Asian states, they have that commission for coordinate that water allocation. That is still in place from Soviet time and not yet reorganized. Once they are doing that, they surely will include the situation in Afghanistan. And very last remark, looking on the Aral Sea, there is some success, not in the Amu Darya basin, but in the Sur Darya basin. With the flow in the Sur Darya, they fill a part of the former Aral Sea. They have split it in a small part and a bigger part, and the small part they are filling, and that works in terms of sufficient water and quality even to revitalize the ecosystems and the fishes. So that is on the way.
Thank you. Last, Abu Balasab.
We all are aware that water cannot be considered in isolation, but rather an essential element of income, food, energy, and physical security. And the major problem in Pakistan is that low water productivity and security are the root cause of the poverty and conflicts in the rural areas. And another problem in Punjab is that the land holdings are very small. And especially the farmers are always harvesting the traditional crops. So how we can overcome these two problems, that how can we motivate the farmers to switch on, like the Punjab in the India, they are also cultivating, the vegetables, and they're providing the potatoes, not only to the India, but also to Pakistan. Basically, these are the main things. And I would like to ask Dr. Yasmin, because they are working in different countries, how can we overcome these two problems, especially with the small land holdings, and the farmers are focusing only on the traditional crops?
Thank you, Abu Balasab. Yasmin? Proceed, please unmute.
Thank you. Sorry, Dr. Mohsin. Dr. Bodla, apologies. I had some slight technical hitch there. So, Dr. Bodla, to respond to you, you're correct. In other countries, we are working in both contexts. And it's one of the areas, actually, we're quite keen to bring in the case of Pakistan as well. From my experience of working in some of the other neighboring countries, and this is important because some of the features, as you mentioned, are very similar in terms of type of agriculture, nature of the farmer, also smallholders in other subcontinent countries as well. But this is where the point I made earlier is so crucial, that what we have adopted in those countries are participatory processes of community engagement and farmer organization engagement. And even internally within our team, I was discussing this a few days ago, that what I've seen is that maybe in the last 10 years, we veered towards, of course, the focus on infrastructure, modernization and upgrading, which is a requirement. But what we should not lose with that is the importance of engaging with the stakeholder. So your point about how have we mobilized multiple smallholders is by collecting them into collectives or into farmer groups. In Bangladesh, we have water management consumer associations registered under the Cooperatives Act in Bangladesh, which function as a unit. And of course, in Pakistan, we have farmer organization, but the amount of emphasis that's going into cultivating that farmer organization, I'm not sure in recent years how much focus has gone into that. I see that the focus has been, again, to look at main system, whereas we're all aware that the losses and the efforts need to be equally emphasized at the farmer level. So in the case of a state in India where we worked in Orissa, we were looking at bulk purchase and bulk sale of produce. So farmers were collected into Pani Panchayats, which they have there. Again, same water user association, but they will work collectively to do a bulk procurement of quality seed and get a better price for it, and then working together for post-harvest and sale, that you can have the same truck accommodating a number of farmers to sell produce, where again, you can get better rates. So I see that that's very important. And I think Dr. Nasir also mentioned this point, and I'd actually written in the chat box on the side as well, that there's plenty of scope to work with farmers and incentivize them. And the point Dr. Nasir made is important, because how do we introduce technologies and best practices to those small farmers who are usually the ones who are on the losing end? And again, matching grant models by giving incentives where a project can provide a certain amount of financing and the farmer shares. We did this in Balochistan about 25 years ago. The first projects I worked on there, we were doing this with communities. And I feel that there's a need for a revival of that participatory approach. And again, I urge from government side, please also demand it. Please also say to us that you want the best practices to be brought from the region, from other countries, because we have that and we can share it. But it requires, again, that collaborative working across two departments, irrigation and agriculture, and bringing in some of those partners who can do that work on the ground level with communities. So it's about bringing in all players and having that open discussion. And I would definitely encourage it. Thank you, Dr. Mohsin.
Thank you. Just last question, Raza.
Thank you. This is Raza Abbasi, the project director, Jalalpur Irrigation Project. We are talking about the improvement in the irrigation application efficiency. So what I can see that recently we de-linked our water pricing from the actual water use by switching to the flat Abiana system. And the pricing, our water pricing or pricing of any commodity is an important tool to control the practices of the farmers. So in this case, why the farmers should switch to the capital, go for the capital investment for improving the efficient irrigation application efficiency. And in the reformation process, which is going on these days, is there any tool has been, or is there any suggestion, or is there any plan to improve this water pricing aspect for improving the water efficiency?
Thank you much for letting me a chance to answer this question. This is a very important question indeed. In fact, a lot of problems which are related to water productivity are in fact questions relating to economics. If we put a right price for the water, everybody would be forced to adopt measures to enhance its efficiency, because the water in Pakistan is almost free. So everybody is at layer to use it anyway he or she wants it to be used. So that's a fundamental problem. But all economic problems are linked to politics of it, and it is difficult to increase the water rates to a level where the true economic value of water is collected from the water users. So that's a practical problem. But having said that, we should keep this option open. And as it was mentioned in the morning session, that Punjab government has already increased water rate by 100% in the last year. This year too, we are going to bring another proposal before the cabinet, and ultimately it will go in a finance bill to the provincial assembly. We would also like to bring some more, enhancement of water rate to an extent, at least to link water rate with inflation. So this would lead to an incremental increase every year, depending on how the inflation is moving. So this is critical for enhancing productivity. But at the same time, there was another mention on linkage between water productivity and flat water rates. So we have a flat water rate system. That means that irrespective of whatever crop is grown by the farmer, he has to pay a similar price for the water he uses. I think this is the correct approach. It is the correct approach in the sense that the process with which we can determine what crops have been grown on a particular field is very expensive. So it means that we need a lot of revenue staff who carry out a survey twice a year, field by field, which crop has been grown and which crop has not been grown, and then put a water rate. So that's a very expensive and costly method. So flat rate is in that sense a more economical choice. Secondly, water as a commodity should have the same price. Now it depends on the ingenuity of the farmer, how best he uses that water. So now if I get electricity, whether I use it for air conditioning of my home, or I use it for running a stove or a fan, this is my choice. But the price of electricity is essentially, because it is one commodity, it would remain same. So some farmers would use the same water for a productive use, or somebody may not use that. So I think the delinking of water from the crop is in these two ways a sensible step. But of course, we need to enhance the water rate as much as possible.
Thank you, sir. So just moving to last, sir. So what's happening in part of the KP? Just a 2 minute, very brief about the KP in terms of improving the water productivity.
For the sake of repetition, I would say we did discuss each and everything. But the thing is that the policy makers, they need to be engaged. The prioritization of funds allocation, adaptation of new technologies, openness to innovation, capacity building of the functionaries involved, and partnership and interdepartmental collaboration and coordination. I think these are the things which will go a long way in terms of efficient water management. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone. Thanks. Please join with me in thanking to all the panelists and then the speaker. Thank you, everyone. Azim, now floor is to you.
Thank you, Dr. Mohsen Hafiz Saab. It was such an informative session. You can guess it from the level of interaction that we had. And I can see Arif Anwar Saab and Azim Saab pacing up and down at the back. So without further ado, let's just dive into the next session, which will be on water governance. And the keynote speaker for this session will be Dr. Andrew Bell, Assistant Professor, Boston University, USA. And the moderator will be Dr. Azim Ali Shah Saab. I'll hand over the session to him.
Assalamu alaikum ji. Good evening to everyone. So our last session is now on the important topic of water governance. My name is Azim Ali Shah. I work for International Water Management Institute as a senior regional researcher on water governance. My key areas of interest are obviously water governance, transboundary water issues, and instrumentation for flow measurement. With me, I have very esteemed speakers in this session. Our keynote speaker is Dr. Andrew Bell, and Dr. Andrew Bell is an assistant professor at Boston University in USA, and he has been with us listening to this discussion all the night. So it's already early morning there. So Andrew will be giving a keynote speech on the topic of water governance and the Indus Basin irrigation system. Then we have our speakers, and ask Dr. Arif to join me on the stage as well. So Dr. Arif, please, if you can also join me on the stage. So Dr. Arif Anwar is principal scientist with the International Water Management Institute. He has a long experience in irrigation, and he describes himself as a research engineer, a non-practicing engineer, and is motivated to find and develop innovative solutions to the problems and constraints of the development under the developing countries. Arif is a strong advocate of investment in human resources, whether that is through formal education or training or capacity building, alongside with investment in the infrastructure and institutions. Arif has a firm belief that the most valuable resource any nation may have is a human resource. So welcome Arif on the panel. Then we have Muhammad Nawaz joining us from USAID mission, Pakistan. Nawaz is the Development Specialist Irrigation, Office of the Economic Growth and Agriculture based in Pakistan. And Nawaz is also the Agreements Officer Representative for the Water Management Enhanced Productivity Project, under which this conference is being organized. Nawaz has a deep understanding of the development in Pakistan, and in particular, agriculture, water resources development. His career spanned from implementing development projects in the KP to project planning at the Planning Commission of the Pakistan, which is now the Ministry of Planning, Development and Strategic Initiatives. And now he's currently working with USAID. Then our next speaker is Dr. Iram Khalid Sattar. And Dr. Iram Khalid Sattar is the program lead, co-class instructor, water diplomacy track leader, and the Sustainable Water Management Program at the Tufts University in US. She is adjunct professor at the Elizabeth Hobbs School of Law, Pace University. He has been visiting professor at the National University of Singapore as well. So I welcome all the panelists, and let's have an audio test first before we start the discussion. If you can turn on your mics. Andrew, can you hear us?
Yeah, no problem. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect. Iram, are you online? Iram, can you hear us?
Yes,
Okay,
I can hear you fine.
Okay, great. Nawasa, can you hear us?
Yes.
Perfect. So I'll first give the floor to Dr. Andrew Bell. He would give a keynote presentation on the topic of water governance in the Indus Basin irrigation system. So over to you, Andrew.
Okay, so thank you very much for having me here. I know we're behind schedule, so I'll be quick and hopefully informative. And I have really just sort of one goal in the little bit that I'll say, and that's to sort of try and make a distinction between concepts of management and concepts of governance as they relate to water. It's a challenge. They're sort of terms that we use often interchangeably, and it doesn't help us that one of the sort of the most universal frameworks for approaching water governance is called integrated water resources management. It's a difficult management. It's a difficult. So what I'd like to do first is just talk, what is it when we talk about governance? And I'm going to start with what are the things that people respond to? And those very broadly are money, rules, and other people. More formally, we might think of these as markets, governments, and civil society, or if we're governance specialists, we might refer to them as well as markets, hierarchies, and networks. I'll set that aside. They do different things, and on its own, a market will do a good job of allowing a resource to be distributed more efficiently, allowing resources to go to those that value them most, although on its own, given the unequal playing field that the world is, this often means that resources go to people who can pay for them. And so to complement markets as a tool of governance, we have government, we have civil society that have a variety of toolkits that help us to maintain equity in the system. And so we might think about efficiency and equity as sort of complementary goals of approaching resource governance. And we have a lot of tools to go about making these things happen. So apologies, I've got to move my Zoom windows around. From governments, we have a range of toolkits, subsidies, tariffs, quotas, taxes, rules. We have prices and trade mechanisms in markets. And from civil society and networks, we have just the basic fact that we know each other and care about each other. But on top of that, we have monitoring tools, culture, other kinds of rules and norms. And across all of these different ways of governing, of course, any approach is capable of spending money to build physical things. So there's a range of different things that people can do, different approaches. It's true that there are very few things that we take a singular approach to, and this is very true across water governance. We don't build things with hammers alone. We rely on a range of different governance tools to reach the sort of efficiency and equity objectives that we may have for our project. And so some really interesting modern examples include, for instance, the water and sanitation service companies, for instance, that have recently developed in KPK. So, okay, that's governance tools, that's governance modes, but what is governance? And then what is management as different from governance? And I want to distinguish goals of setting objectives for a resource on one hand and meeting those objectives on the other. And I want to say that good governance is about being careful about setting objectives. And above that, it's about creating good spaces with the right people and the right environment for those objectives to be set appropriately. And then when we have those objectives, good management is about meeting them. And so together with Dr. Arif, Dr. Azim, we've done a bit of work to try and put this in context for water infrastructure systems like the IBIS. And I'm going to show a bit of a horrendogram, a bit of a bunch of arrows connecting to different things, but I hope it might be helpful. What I'm showing here at the top here is how we might think about the basic process of providing water supply. We have water coming in as stream flow, as groundwater. We have in place channels, storages that help sort of create for us some kind of water supply. This is mediated by how we manage that, so that in the end, this gives us water supply at some place and time that's available for different people to use. Now, if we think just a little bit beyond this and start thinking about the stakeholders and the users, and this is something that came up in the last session, imagining we have some different set of uses. Maybe we have irrigators, perhaps we have some sanitation needs. We have a set of users whose needs possibly overlap. In some cases, those who need water for irrigation may be the same people that need water for sanitation. And the better we do of sort of incorporating those separate needs and priorities into water resources planning, the better governance we're doing. And in our work, we've kind of isolated two distinct challenges, and I've marked them there with little stars. The challenge of allocating water across different uses, and then allocating water within a particular use across different users. It's kind of distinct challenges. So if we think about this bigger loop as our water resources planning process being informed by the needs and priorities of different users, having the ability to set objectives in terms of capital investments, new hardware, and different sort of software, different institutional goals for how we manage what's in place, informed ideally by what's happening on the ground, we're able to kind of tease apart a few different kind of layers of management through governance. And we're going to borrow a concept called triple loop learning from the resource management literature that thinks about what is it that we're getting and what is it that we learn as we do in the dynamic process of governance. And in this, again, big messy diagram, across the first line here, what we're doing is what we would call single loop learning. We're looking at how well we meet objectives, and we're really not doing too much to change our system. We might be turning knobs a little bit, changing when water's scheduled or what it costs a little bit, but not doing too much. As we move further down and we're doing a better job of bringing people into the room, questioning what are the right tools for what we're doing, that's more the governance space. So the sort of double loop, the next layer down is questioning, do we have the right objectives for our water in place? Are we using the right toolkits? And then further down, triple loop learning is, do we have the right space to even be thinking about this? Have we involved the right people to be making the decision about what are the right tools to put in play? And I guess one last way that I'll try and make that distinction between management and governance processes is that to the extent that we're interested in a specific resource outcome, we're probably at the management end of the spectrum. And to the extent that we're interested in some kind of a process outcome, we're much further down into the governance space. So throwing a couple of different ways to think about this at you today, but sort of setting objectives versus meeting objectives, and process outcomes versus resource outcomes as ways to kind of distinguish this governance versus management spectrum. Now, I presented, the simple idea of you have a water supply and you have users, but it's not always like that. And I guess those of us who spend any time thinking about the IBIS know that it can be quite different as you get bigger. And that large systems aren't just big, small systems. They're much more complex. You end up with much more segmented water supplies where you don't have necessarily the same potential to share across them. Your users are far less connected, and you have all kinds of different boundaries across which your flows are moving. And so in water governance, across the world, we try different scales and different approaches to bound water issues in place and address them. And those can be approached at administrative units that we're familiar with, between state boundaries, federal, district, municipal boundaries. As well, there's a whole world of problems that we try to address using physical boundaries, like a basin or a catchment or a watershed, or in the case of the IBIS, an irrigation command. And then in some other sort of more innovative spaces across the world, we've tried to find somewhere in between, sort of somewhere between an administrative unit and a physical boundary. And this is the sort of world of water districting that you see, some successes of in parts of the world. So the sort of modern flagship for thinking about good water governance that's been applied in various ways across the world is this thing that I mentioned was, confusingly labeled integrated water resources management. And it does a lot of things, but however it takes place across the world at whatever scale, some of the things that it has in common are, it typically uses, it's a physical boundary approach, river basins as the boundary for both the resource and the users that are making use of the water. A real push for participatory processes, for setting rules, for monitoring systems, and for being adaptive about what those rules and monitoring approaches are. And there's a real strong emphasis on prices as a means of communicating scarcity. These are kind of three very common characteristics of IWRM, wherever it takes place. But there will always be critics, and there are some concerns raised about what IWRM is in practice. One of the things that gets raised a lot is that often where we see good outcomes in IWRM, it may have less to do with IWRM itself and instead more to do with the sort of strong collective action that you may have pre-existing the application of IWRM. It could be that there are good rules and norms in place for communities to share things, and we're misattributing to IWRM. And as well, it can be the case that basins aren't always the right way for doing things. Participation and more participation isn't always what's missing from the problem solution. And kind of tying that together, the thing about IWRM is that it's a clear set of rules for how you should go about doing things. And as we just talked about a few slides ago, governance is about being thoughtful and mindful of creating a space where you can define those things for the system itself. So when you've walked in with an idea of how things should be, you've already kind of taken a step away from what good governance ought to be. So this is some of the criticisms that get raised about IWRM on its own. And so what I want to do in the sort of a last one or two theoretical slides is kind of go down a little bit to the theory from which, our understanding of participatory processes and the things that led to IWRM come from. And a lot of this comes from CPR, common pool resource theory, which most of which comes from the work begun by Eleanor Ostrom. And a lot of our understanding comes from looking at systems at relatively small scales and thinking about what does it mean then to try and scale them up. And in her work, and then which has been carried on over the last decade by many, many other people, some common themes of things that matter always come up. And you may see some links to what we just discussed for IWRM. Good resource governance requires very clearly defined boundaries and users. It requires the rights and capacity for people to organize, to join in, and to leave, and to be able to tailor rules locally to fit local context. Locally, people have to be able to resolve conflicts. They have to have mechanisms in place that allow them to enforce the rules that are there. And whatever it is that they're doing at this local scale, it has to be compatible with all the things that are happening at bigger and smaller scales. These are sort of basic characteristics of what makes resource governance work well. As you move up in scale, those need to be preserved, and this gets hard. It can be particularly hard for really, really big systems like the IBIS, and this kind of helps highlight some of the structural reasons why over the last 30 years there have been challenges in making participatory irrigation management work. It can be difficult. Some of these things, when you have a hydraulic community that people don't necessarily choose to be in or outside of, you lose some of the capacity to engage people in the same way that you might otherwise. These are some of the things that structurally and theoretically make it hard to do good water resource governance in really complicated systems like the IBIS. Another thing that can be very complicated that is unique to irrigation commands and sort of makes them different from all of the other ways we've thought about resource governance is that irrigation commands are not water catchments, right? Catchments manage all kinds of tributary flow in from rainfall, from snowmelt, from glacier, in such a way that as flows integrate together, the variability in those flows drops. So as you're moving downward in the system, you have much more certainty over what you get. And irrigation commands then take that low variability flow and distribute it out. So as you move down in irrigation command out further into distributaries and watercourses, you're increasing your variability. And so your ability to, a water users association in an irrigation command faces, a very different sort of uncertainty picture than does a sort of a small water users association in a catchment. Very different things. This is a complicating factor for big systems like the Islands. So what some of the work that Dr. Arif and Azim and I have done over the last decade or so has been trying to think about, for the IBIS, what are the kinds of tools that can be really valuable, that can be helpful. And what I want to do really quickly to wrap up is present a couple of things and then look at them in the sort of management versus governance lens. So one of our early experiments was to identify what people would be willing to pay for in terms of Abiana if they believed that it would lead to improved surface water availability and reliability for them. And so we conducted something called a discrete choice experiment in which we're just asking people, would you prefer a world like this or a world like this, or would you stick with what you have? And what came out of this experiment was a couple of really interesting results. One of which was that the more water that people were currently receiving, the more reliable their supply was, the more they'd be willing to pay for it. And in economics, this is a bit of a strange thing because it implies this upward sloping demand curve. And the implication of which is that it could be that there's all kinds of untapped transformative potential in Punjab to do different things with water before farmers kind of get to the point where they can't do any better. And it says that if we could transform the way we collect money and finance the sort of provision of reliable surface water in Punjab, we could observe something very, very different, really, really different than what we've observed over the last decades. So that was a really exciting result. And thinking about what does that say about Abiana? So I want to go back to this idea of, as distinguishing from governance and management, we want to set objectives as good governors and meet objectives as good managers. And when we talk about Abiana, there are a lot of different things that we can be doing or thinking about. We're thinking about how well we assess and collect it. We may be thinking about adjusting what those rates are, but stepping out a little bit further, we can reconsider what it is that Abiana should apply to, what it is that we ought to be doing with, and who should be making decisions over how Abiana gets used. We might eventually be in a space where we're reconsidering the area versus volumetric Abiana rates, thinking about water market development, reconsidering the idea of pricing as a signal. And as we do this, we are kind of moving out on this spectrum of resource outcomes at the top down towards process outcomes. And we're sort of working through a spectrum of objectives we're trying to meet. We're moving through thinking about changing what our objectives are, and again, rethinking what it is that our objective space can be. So even when we're talking about Abiana on its own as a particular tool of governance, there's a whole range of management through governance objectives that we can be aware of and be thinking about. So one other little bit of work that we did, we ran some game experiments where we tried to look at how important information about how much water people were getting was, and how important tools for resolving conflicts were, like sanctions. And so we found that sanctions matter, but even more important in our little game environment was that information mattered. And we were able to verify this in a large scale real system experiment led by Dr. Azim, where we set up flow monitoring stations above the watercourse outlet in a particular distributary in Punjab. It took a long time to do this, and I'm sure many of you will know the challenges of trying to measure water in an irrigation system. Once the water slows down, it starts dropping out sediment, it fouls, it's really difficult to measure. And so the system that Azim designed is this ultrasonic depth measurement just above the moga. And what's really kind of an exciting thing here is that it highlights for us, if the best case we have for measuring flow in the IBIS is at the watercourse scale, this really means that water users associations are going to have this really important role in sort of distributional justice as we move into a world where perhaps we are measuring things, maybe we have volumetric rights. The Water Users Association is going to stay really, really important. So what we did in this experiment, and I'll just show kind of briefly this, here I'm showing in this distributary what the water flow was over about a 2-year period. And this first red line here is when we conducted our baseline survey of participants, talked to them about water they were receiving, conflicts they were experiencing. And then over the next year, we measured, or we made information available to them about what they were receiving, what other people in the distributary were receiving. And then a year later, we followed up just to see how things might have been different. And what's visually obvious from looking at this picture is that it happened that the year that we collected data, water service provisioning, so water delivery, was lower than it had been in the previous year. But when we spoke to people in our end line, they reported receiving even more water. So they reported that they had received more water over this last year than the year before, even though this was not objectively true. But also importantly, the set of conflicts that they identified was totally transformed. While previously they had been blaming the use of tube wells elsewhere in the distributary for leading to a lack of water delivery, now they acknowledge receiving water, but were much more concerned with lack of contribution to local watercourse maintenance as being a reason that they didn't have water. So, a transformation of less complaint that water wasn't coming in and more complaint that water just wasn't being used well. So just without doing anything else, just allowing farmers to be aware of the picture of water and who's getting what transformed what was happening in the system. So again, trying to frame this and look at what's governance and what's management here. And my framework from before, when we're looking at flow information at the sort of closest to resource level, we report flow delivery. But as we kind of move up more towards the process outcomes, we can support conflict resolution. We can start to identify across different spaces where we have gaps in equity people are receiving. We can rethink investments. We can have good feedback for what kinds of tools and governance tools and approaches do better for us in our system. And we can also start to think about what are alternative sinks and uses for water. And that's where we start to move into this world of thinking about how can we share things across different sectors. So I'm gonna close up there. I had a couple of messages that I hoped I would get across in the time that I had, and that's that when we're talking, you hear the word governance, we're talking about creating good spaces, making the right tools available in order to set objectives for resources. And then when we talk about management, we are typically speaking much more carefully about meeting whatever those objectives are. Both of these things get harder with bigger systems in a non-linear way. And there are a lot of challenges with meeting the theoretical needs of good participatory governance in a big system, a big hydraulic system like the IBIS. We've done a bit of work trying to figure out what could be helpful. And one of the things that's really standing out for us right now is that making flows well known, making them transparent appears to be, for various reasons, one of the really nice immediate objectives. So thanks for your attention, and I'll sort of pass the floor to the next speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for an excellent presentation. The topic of water governance is and differentiating between water governance and water management is not a very trivial thing. But key takeaways for me from this presentation are governance is about setting objectives, and management is about meeting those objectives. Governance is about the process outcomes, and management is about the resource outcomes. So these are very powerful messages from this presentation. And the two studies that Andrew mentioned, Andrew has been involved working in Pakistan on those studies. One was about, willingness to pay for Abiana by the farmers, and the other was information that we provided. And we saw tremendous results where information led to people believing in what they were already getting, but they were claiming they were not getting enough. So once we provide the information, they simply kind of change the track or discourse from claiming about the less water availability towards the maintenance sort of things. So with this, I think I'll now move to my panelists. I'll first ask Nawasa from USAID. You listened to our keynote presentation. So what is your take on water governance issues in Pakistan, and where we are lacking really to improve the water governance in the Indus Basin irrigation system? Ji Nawasa.
Ji, thank you very much, Azim. Before I respond to your question, let me acknowledge that this is the first time that I see top government leadership sitting with us all day, including my leader from USAID. So this shows the degree of political willingness that we have today. We are fortunate. So coming to the question, governance, as I see it, is a social arrangement of putting water, infrastructure, and people in such a sequence or a frame to achieve maximum societal benefits. So looking at this equation, the water and infrastructure parts are relatively easiest to do. But the people part of the equation is complex and challenging. Therefore, governance remains to be a challenge all the time because it deals with people having sometimes conflicting interests. So just to mention the difference between governance and management, Andrew mentioned it elaborately. So for me, governance provides the roadmap. Management walks on the roadmap. Governance is leadership. Management is execution. If governance is poetry, if I can borrow words from Richard Nixon, if governance is poetry, management is prose. And also, let's not forget that governance is not government only. Most of the time when we talk about governance, automatically it comes to our mind that we are talking about government. It's not only government. It has private sector, its communities, cultures, norms. All these things make up governance, formal and informal institutions. So to make it more elaborate, let me give you an example of a football game. FIFA makes rules for the game. Umpires ensures compliance of the rules in the field, and player scores goals, to me, which to me is output. And to win the match, that is the outcome. Spectators enjoy the game and pay for this enjoyment through tickets. And if I can use the word of Douglas North, a Nobel laureate, governance is the way how the game is played. So all these things, if you put together water, infrastructure, and people, and you make an equation, and as mentioned, if you set objectives and make a good results at the end, that is how governance is. For me, as you asked the question that what could be a good model or how can we improve things here in Pakistan, so I have identified 5 things, maybe 5 parameters, which are essential part of governance. Number first, that mapping the decision-making stakeholders. First, to identify who makes the rules for water management. And the second thing is, in this one, when you are identifying the stakeholders, you have to keep in mind federal government, because some of their laws are actually influencing irrigation, provincial parliaments, governments, irrigation department, bureaucracy, water user association, and private sector. So the one important thing in mapping these stakeholders is to be cognizant of the power differences, because the difference in power makes decisions sway towards those with a louder voice, I should say. The second thing in this, in the 5 parameters, is coordination. So once the stakeholders are identified, the second important thing is the pathways through which these stakeholders actually make decisions and how those decisions are made. Are they inclusive or exclusive? How these decisions are communicated, which is a transparency question. And the last one, that how they are implemented, which is the accountability question. So the first thing, identify or map the stakeholders. The second thing is the pathways and processes through which they interact. The third important thing to me is rules of the game, and what kind of rules for water management we have, who owns water, who have access to water, how water is developed, how it is allocated, distributed, used, drained, how cost recovery is dealt, water quality, equity, and externality. So these are the rules of the game. And the fourth important thing is implementation capacity. What kind of organizations you have, formal and informal, their technical and administrative capacity, and most importantly, I should say most importantly, it's the incentive structure to implement rules and decision. The fifth parameter is the targets. Without targets, we cannot set objectives. For example, you have a storage target, you have infrastructure expansion target, you have irrigated area, you have water saving targets, you have water reallocation targets, you have cost recovery targets, revenue and upgradation. The sixth, I have said 5, but I added the sixth one as well, that you need a good monitoring system to look at all this in a cyclic way. And there are 4 things which I have identified as cross-cutting, which is science, technology, gender, and private sector. These are cross-cutting parameters that should go all these through all these parameters. So for me, to end my talk, is that governance is putting all these parameters in action to produce the desired results, which I would call policy outcome. As I said this morning by USAID mission director, that good governance leads to improved productivity, which can be measured by better service for the end users and higher income. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nawaz Saab. I learned a lot from your brief talk, and I like the idea of governance as a poetry and management as prose. Moving on, I will now ask Dr. Iram to step in. And Iram, I would like to ask you, since the system of irrigation was developed by British in this part of the world, and it was to serve certain interests of the colonizers at that time. So in the post-colonial world, how can we make the system more service-oriented to address the issues of competing uses of water, at the same time, distributing the scarce resource equitably? So where does you see, the governance lacking in this domain, and how can we improve that?
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Thank you very much, Azim and Dr. Arif, for including me in the conversation. A very early good morning from here. I know it's evening there for you, but it's 6:30 in the morning here. So early morning for us. I think, Azim, I really like the thrust of your question, because I have been listening to comments and remarks throughout the evening. Now, Lahari Saab actually did mention this, and it's interesting because he alluded to the fact that we have inherited a colonial water management, governance, rules-based system. And other people have sort of talked a little bit about this also, and what Andrew just sort of talked about, right? Where the rules are coming from really does matter. So what they do is that they want to conform society towards their own objectives, for which they were very, very successful. And here I would like to be maybe a little provocative. I think we have a bit of sort of a fantasy that I think is not backed by actual results. And our fantasy is, and this is a collective sort of idea that we have somehow imbibed, that we have inherited a great system and it is our job to run this system. So we have rules and we sort of try and apply them, and those who don't meet them, then we try and put them into the system, instead of trying to move to a system that is responsive to where people want to take it. So we're trying to move into the 21st century with 19th century tools. That's how I always think of it. And we have to be bold. Other people have mentioned this morning also earlier, the extreme threat from climate change to the country. And this is not trivial. The latest, the best figures that we have now tell us that by 2050, we could lose a third of the glaciers on which 60% of Pakistan's water comes in our river system. And again, people have mentioned it's a single river system, right? So we are very, very dependent. There's very little room for margin of error. By 2100, that's 80 years away. It's actually not that far away. And again, I know we have to be very responsive to political cycles, but for the life of a nation, 80 years is not that much time. By which time, 50% of the glaciers may have gone. Meanwhile, population is rising. And again, we sort of tiptoe around the fact that population is rising. So this is a classic economic problem. There is dwindling supply and rising demand. And that X, where it meets, it's going to get you to conflict. One of the things that legal systems can do is really be mediators of conflict, and we just do not do that well. Again, the inherited system has its own problems, and we haven't evolved new either consensual decision making, more collaborative rules-based sort of decision making that take us to somewhere that we want to go to. So the colonial system is a major problem because it's a misfit in terms of the tools you need to do the job that you are going towards. But I want to offer one more sort of thing that I think is a natural outcome that may be even a little more provocative. The tiny little nation of the Netherlands, for the last several years, has become the second largest exporter of food and agricultural products by dollar value in the world. And we need to think about that very, very seriously. This is a tiny little place, and how is it doing this? Australia, Russia, I mean, it is second only to the United States in terms of what it is earning from what it is exporting. And this is only food and other crops. It's a world beater, right? So I think what we need to do is that our vision is not directed where we need to go. So again, this mismatch between like what is governance and what is policy setting, right? If we do not set a vision that says, well, you know, why can't we be the next Netherlands, for instance? Because is our goal to be farmers, or is our goal to be food secure? And that we haven't made those decisions. So I think we need to make a lot of decisions given the resource constraints that are coming and given the system we have in place to figure out where are we headed. If we get that right, I think we've heard all day, there is an immense amount of knowledge. We know a lot about running this system. We've been doing it for 150, 180 years. There is no reason why Pakistan cannot be a world leader in trying to figure these problems out, which are global problems. And yet we're not solving it, and we don't have the vision to think at this global scale and says we can take the lead because we have an amazing, huge system that we are basically running into the ground instead of producing great wealth from. So I think we can really take many things very seriously, and hopefully maybe this conversation opens up the space where we involve and sort of create an ecosystem that says, yeah, let's first set our direction, and then absolutely we can get there. Let's head that way.
Thank you very much. Very provocative sort of thoughts, and I really like the idea of changing our thinking to from the colonial era to the challenges of the 21st century. And we can achieve it. We have the experience, but we just need to find the right decision space and where we can think about the larger issues. Now, Dr. Arif, I'll turn towards you. as Andrew mentioned, and then also elaborated by Nawasa, there are certain facets of, I would say, good water governance, transparency, accountability, stakeholder participation, feedback mechanism. So participatory irrigation management reforms, when they were brought in 97, these apparently had all these facets, right? Where did we go wrong with this approach? And in future, if we are to really improve water governance, where do we involve these stakeholders in the management and then the governance decision space?
Sound check. So I think, as you know, Azim, we've struggled with this idea a lot and tried to really, which is the purpose of, and we're sharing what we think and what we understand with all our water professionals today. For me, I think increasingly I've come to sort of one or two areas where I'm increasingly at least convinced myself. First of all, the term water governance. I increasingly have the view that it's just shorthand for governance of the institutions that manage our water. And the institutions themselves manage the water. So water governance is at that higher level. You govern the institutions, you don't govern the natural resource itself. And I borrow from governance. We're not talking about governance in a school, we're talking about governance of the health system or the educational system and all. And to answer your question about participatory irrigation management, perhaps what we tried to do was we focused really at the management level in introducing participation of the stakeholders. Whereas in effect, what we should have tried to do more is, as Andrew has put it, make sure that the stakeholders are involved in setting the objectives. It may not change from some of the current objectives. I would imagine that if you involve stakeholders in setting the objectives, equity would remain a key objective as it is now. So that's not to say it will. Abiana collection may be a little different because on the one hand, you would need resources. But on the other hand, if they're paying it, you might be reluctant to pay it. But it influences thinking because you also start to realize, or the stakeholders start to realize that, well, to make the resources available, you've actually also got to, assess it, collect it, and so on. So I think that participation, well, I'm personally a little more inclined that participation should be at the governance level and not at the management level. The management should be, professionals who know how to manage this very, very complex system. And so they're setting the sort of the policy objectives, maybe some of even the management objectives, but then you leave the professionals to do the management. And that's possibly where we got the matching wrong. Do I have evidence to support this? Well, no, that's why I'm a researcher, right? It's to collect the evidence before we make the large-scale investments. Thank you.
Interesting point. I'll now come back to Andrew. Andrew, you mentioned involving stakeholders at a level which is, somewhat between hydraulic boundaries and the physical, let's say, administrative boundaries. So listening to Arif, he thinks that, where we went wrong with the PIM approach was we involved the stakeholders, the farmers in the management, rather they should have been involved in the governance part, setting the objectives. What's your take on this?
Yeah, it's a great point. And like Arif, of course, I have no evidence to support anything I'll say next. But I guess one of the things that we know about good resource governance is this importance of having kind of a community of common interest, which is kind of what fuels and sort of self-reinforces the engagement, participation, and willingness to sort of create, co-create, and adhere to norms and rules. And so I think, a question to ask is, and this is not nearly as wonderfully provocative as Dr. Aram's point, but if we want to be thinking carefully about where to look, it's at what scale and where do we have meaningful communities of common interest around which to be thinking about water. We've sort of told people, by again, by this sort of century and a half of where we laid down canals and who was able to connect to them, these are the communities that you are a part of, and these are the communities that matter for our purposes. But I think challenging that and saying from a water perspective and a water user perspective and modern water needs perspective, what are the communities of common interest and where do those intersect? And I don't have the answer to that, but I think to me that's one of the ways to kind of reframe the vision and step away from anything that might be a fantasy.
Azim, could I jump in on that point?
Yes, I was about to ask a supplementary question also. You can have your comment and just from the legal point of view, you have been a student of law. So is there any space where you think, the legal environment does not provide enough, for improving the water governance, where we are lacking in terms of the legal regime we have around water and water governance? So first your short point and then about the question.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, because I think I can fold it in. So Andrew was making the point about communities of interest and maybe finding common interests. And what's absolutely fascinating, something that we have witnessed in especially water law governance, we have witnessed it, over several centuries, from something called riparian doctrine to something called prior appropriation doctrine. And this happened when essentially the settlers moved west from the eastern United States. And take one example, prior appropriation is a totally different idea. Prior appropriation says that whoever gets to a water source first can divert it entirely for their own productive purposes. And if you can achieve production with it, then it's yours. Everybody else who comes next has to get in line behind you. Riparianism, on the other hand, said everybody has an equal, undisturbed right by every other use to be able to get water, and no one can interfere with anybody else's water source. So often, and I think this is where I would like to offer another perspective, especially legal, where we have seen progress and a lot more production and productive value being taken from water resources is in fact when people have been in conflict about what they want to do with that existing water source. Take one example. Las Vegas in Nevada is in the middle of a desert. And it's a vacation capital, there's lots of water, right? So what Las Vegas does, in fact, is that it dries out communities around it. It sucks up because it can pay so much more, it's so much richer, it can produce so much more economic value from that water that no farmer ever could anywhere outside. All of this water sort of, comes and produces a lot of economic growth. So a lot of times legal change comes about when people have, in fact, a difference in vision with what they want to do. So we have choices to make, and the law is exactly what's good. And law, if you let it run, in fact, if we sort of say, look, we will allow people in Pakistan, in the Indus River Basin, to have competing uses of water, to bid for that water, and therefore there can be other uses from it. And that is a very simple, it will be slow, but it's a way to change the fact that currently 97% of our fresh water is allocated and appropriate for, in fact, very low value agricultural production. So this is again a question of what is it that we want to do. To take the example, this is not that water will always go for productive uses, because society changes in its conceptions, right? So in the Murray-Darling Basin in Australia, what's fascinating is when they put in place the Murray-Darling Basin Authority, the environment became the biggest water rights holder in that basin. Because people came in and said, no, of course, and we value environment highly. Also, we value in-stream uses, fisheries, ecosystem services. So no, we don't want to just like take it all, dry out everything and take it to Las Vegas, as it were, but we want to leave water in the stream. So when you allow contestation, actually society comes up with very good uses for its water resources. And that's what I think we have been afraid of. We have been fixed into a very rigid system, and we have tried for decades to just make it work and work and work, and it doesn't. And we neither get economic growth, nor we get sort of food security, and we get environmental degradation, groundwater pollution, you name it. So I think that if we allow contestation and stop being so afraid of it and start trusting the capacity of our people, I think we will surprise ourselves and be amazed at what better outcomes we are getting from our existing water resources.
Thanks, Iram. I'd like the idea of contestation and also the competition among the competing uses of water. Coming back to Nawasa, where do you situate the role of private sector, particularly with regard to large infrastructure development projects where we have loans from the donors like USAID, and later on, if these projects also suffer the same issues of lack of governance, do you think there's a role of private sector also to play from the beginning or towards the end of the project?
Yes, thank you very much, Azim. Just to a comment about the point that Aram raised, the contestation. I think it's the same thing that we have been suffering in terms of the wheat market. Like we have lost our faith in our markets and in our people, and government took that responsibility every year to buy wheat for the people, and it becomes even a kind of gold for those who actually love profits, quick profits, and the market is distorting time and again. So the same is happening with water. My own, if I can look at it because it is primarily a public sector dominated irrigation system. And I look at it, and if I see what's the problem, why we are here, what we are discussing here today. So here will come the point. The point is that we have a huge elephant in the room, irrigation system. It even requires a lot of money for us to maintain it, let alone to upgrade it. And every year, I was just looking this morning, about $1,300 million is currently being spent on upgradation of barrages and canals and so on. So why we are here? Because we have a huge system, but we have no money. So what we should do now? So let's, as Iram alluded to and as Andrew, we have to change our mindset. We have to keep faith in ourselves and in our people. Let's open up the door of irrigation system. For me, our irrigation system, Lagari Saab, will be like a new oil for the region. And I have a very strong faith that this irrigation system can give us the benefit as oil has given in the Gulf countries. Why? I just tell you one thing. We are providing water to the irrigation department is providing water to the farmers the same way they have been providing 100 years ago. I just give you one example. Why not provide water to towns and local and cities from irrigation system just by installing a small filtration plant and give water? And there, from 500 to, we give farmer 60, I did my research, 60,000 liters of water we give on 1 rupee. Lagari Saab. 60,000 liters of water we even from Tarbela Reservoir, which is pure mineral water. And in cities, people pay 1,000 to 4,000 per water tanker. So we have a market for our water. We have a market for so our irrigation system is spread all over the country. I think on 60% of the land. Let's think where we should get money from. This water we can give to the people. This will be incentive for the irrigation system. Will earn money from licenses and other profit. Farmers will earn money from, I'm not saying permanent water trading. They can just trade their excess water, and that will be incentive. They will turn to the drip system. Another example, I live in Sawadi. There is one canal, and my friends from KPR there, Pehur High Level. Each summer, 20,000 people regularly go to swim in the canal. Why can't we build cascades of swimming pool which is non-consumptive, and irrigation department will earn huge money from it? So there are others. My point is the private sector, Azim, you said, this all shall be driven by private sector, because government has no money in its pocket. So we have to open up the door. I am not going to accept that Pakistan is a water scarce country. Israel is water scarce country. Gulf is a water scarce country. How can I say we are water scarce country? There is water everywhere in this country, except few spots. So my last suggestion will be that we open up the thinking of the government. I'm not saying, because I should say the people as well. As I earlier said, governance is not only government, but today state is everywhere, and we have to rely on the state. So state should come up, open up its door to new thinking. Private sector should be brought, new investment should be brought. Irrigation water shall be used through drip system, and the only way we can do it is to create new markets for irrigation water where we can sell this water. We will earn money, we will invest in agriculture. Just last point, 3 days ago I am coming from my hometown. The cabbage crop in my field was waiting for Allah. The cabbage crop in my field, it's drying. No one is there to buy. So things have to be connected to this. Actually, agriculture is value-added water. So we have to connect all these things, and that is what private sector can do and help us. Thank you very much, Azim. I'm sorry for being a bit long.
No, I highly appreciate your illuminating comments. Now I'll ask the audience if they have any question for the panelists or the keynote speaker.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Engineer Maria Said, Sub-Divisional Officer, Punjab Irrigation Department. We just talked about water governance and the reforms in the water governance. We have set our targets. I don't have any questions. I just want to add a comment. Dr. Ilham just pointed about the Murray-Darling Basin Authority in Australia. I also have studied that. They do have a model. I think we also need a governance model. But apart from including its major aspects, we should include 4 key points also. Number 1, key environment assets. Number 2, critical drinking water needs. 3rd, healthy ecosystems. And 4th one, fit for purpose water quality. It's time to pay heed to our environmental flows as well as the environmental assets in irrigation basin irrigation Indus Basin irrigation system for better governance. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, madam, for your points. I think the 4 points that you've raised, the discussion we have had, they fall under the governance, setting the objectives type paradigm. And obviously, you know, if you consider these while setting the objectives, you would be in a position to improve the process outcomes later on. Any other comment, question from the audience, sir? Yeah, I can imagine.
Thank you, Azim Saab. Actually, there was a brief discussion about this participatory irrigation management and its introduction in Punjab Irrigation Department as PIDA. I remain involved as a young professional about 20 years back when the first Water User Association was developed at Hakra 4R. At that time, I used to work for IMI. At that time, most, I think, the competent group which should speak on its this experience, its failure or its success is the irrigation department. But unfortunately, there is very less contribution from that part, and it's mainly more has been written from this researcher group and the people who are not directly involved in this management of the irrigation system. I will quote a few things, a few quotations from my seniors, because at that time, starting from the beginning, I'm saying the irrigation department was not in favor of establishing these water users associations. And that's why they were very confined. They were not open in commenting on that establishment or introduction of that intervention. So one of my seniors used to say that actually the banks and owners, they are trying to achieve the objectives of this intervention as a project, or they're taking it as a project, and they want to get the results on a very short-term basis, whereas it's a behavioral or it's a generational change. The people who are used to have the good old system, they can't change so quick. Second thing, that I had an association of this to this intervention while traveling to different parts of the world. So I kept on studying different these management systems in different parts of the world. Last year I was in Japan. I'm saying here in Pakistan, the participatory irrigation management of the Water Users Association were introduced on the basic principles of democracy. So in many areas, basically the coherence of this farming community was rather damaged because the group who couldn't win the election, that was prosecuted for that not giving vote to the winners for that period of time, which for the ruling party. But when I went to Japan, I asked a question that to one of these LID members, that when was the last dispute in your this management, this irrigation management district or this organization? They said 1945 or 1954. So I was really surprised. So I was really curious. I studied a little bit more. So what was the major difference? That basically the decision mechanism in those management units was based on unanimity. Like everybody has to agree if the decisions to be taken. Not 2/3 majority, not 50% majority, because it basically splits the community. But in that case, what was happening, everything was decided unanimity. So there was, of course, give and take. So if somebody wants to get a decision in his favor, he has to offer something to bring other people on board. So in that sense, I think that was the major cause for the failure and the defragmentation of this participation irrigation management. That was my comment.
Okay, thank you for your comments. And with this, I thank my panelists again for their invaluable comments and answers to the questions. And also I thank Andrew for the keynote presentation. With this, I conclude this session, and over to you, sir.
Thank you, Azim Saab. I have a very quick announcement to make. We have organized a day trip tomorrow to our new Khan Ki Barrage, and the vehicle will be departing from PC tomorrow morning at 9:30. So those of the attendees, participants who are interested in going to the Khan Ki tomorrow to see the newly built barrage and the structure are requested to please have their names written down so that we can arrange the vehicle properly. And With this, we will conclude today's workshop. I will invite our Honorable Minister for Irrigation, Mohsen Khan Lagari Sahab, for the concluding remarks. So please.
I'd like to end this session today by thanking all the panelists, the moderator, in the USA. Let me not miss any names. Dr. Bernard, Mr. Mohsen Hafiz, Abu Balasab was here, Ms. Yasmin Siddiqui from ADP, Malik Akram Saab from Water Management, Mr. Andrew Bell, Dr. Andrew Bell, who joined us through the video link. Mr. Azim did a wonderful job of moderating things here. Ms. Iram Khalid, we met earlier also, and Nawaz Saab and I have been having these discussions on pricing water appropriately for it to be valuable. Nawaz Saab, it's a very difficult thing to do in this political world. We political people are always thinking about votes and how to please people, which sometimes the country collectively pays dearly for those decisions, but I'm at it. I've had the Abhiana doubled the first year and then another 50% increase the next year. And thank you very much all. You took out a day from your busy schedules to be with us here. And hopefully with this interaction, we have learned something from each other. And when we walk out of this door today, we will be a little better informed than when we entered this room. Thank you very much, everyone.
Please don't forget to have your names written down for tomorrow's trip. Thank you.